I just wanted some clarification on tithing.
Being enabled to forgive somebody who causes an offense
towards
towards
it really matter whether someone is Protestant or Catholic?
The genealogies are different from Matthew to Luke.
I was wondering what the Bible said in terms of what I should do.
This is Pastor's Perspective. We're here every Monday through Friday providing answers on a variety of topics, including the Bible, end times, other religions, and the family. Call right now with your question at 1-888-564-6173. That's 888-564-6173. You can also post your question at facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective. And now here again is your host, Brian Perez.
Indeed, we are here every Monday through Friday, and today is Wednesday, which falls between Monday and Friday. So we're here ready to answer some Bible questions. Give us a call. We'd love to hear from you at 888-564-6173. 888-564-6173 is the number to call us today and every day that we're here from 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. And tomorrow, Thursday, we'll be here for 2 hours from 3 to 5. So if you can't get through before 4 today, give us a call tomorrow. You've got until 5 o'clock. But today on the program, let's get that taken care of first. We've got author and apologist Dr. Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube and 1minuteapologist.com. He's joining us on the Bobby Cam from his home in Charlotte, North Carolina, or at least near Charlotte, North Carolina. And in the studio with me, sitting in for Brian Brodersen, is Mike Chaddick. Mike is the senior pastor at Image Church in Orange County, California. Welcome, gentlemen, to the program.
Thanks for having us. Good to be here. Good to see my Image Church brother over there.
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking I needed to sing Mike a song. He's a muscle man.
Speaking of singing a song, maybe you guys should write an Image Church song.
We probably, how about a hip hop rap video? Bobby, what do you think?
I think it would be great, and we could talk about how I ripped the name off from Mike, and we could have a lot of fun with that.
That would be amazing. We do need to explore that topic.
We can make it happen. We have the resources available. All right, 888-564-6173 is our number. And you can also send us your question using the messenger feature on facebook.com/pastorsperspective. But because we are primarily a radio program and we're dependent on audio, we prefer to hear the sound of your voice, not just my voice reading your questions, but we love hearing from you guys. So give us a call, 888-564-6173. Here's one of those Facebook questions, in fact, two of them here from the same person. I know as Christians we're supposed to love and forgive. I'm having a difficult time with issues concerning an unbelieving husband and his daughter. I'm praying for the Lord to show me the way to love and forgive, but things are very hurtful. If the Lord decides to take his church the moment I have these negative feelings, will I be taken up in the rapture? And the second question, regarding the once saved, always saved teaching, I heard a pastor say that if you're saved and continue to do things that are not of Christ, you'll still go to heaven, but you just won't get any rewards. My stepdaughter claims she's a Christian, but she gossips, she lies, and she's into voodoo. What are your thoughts on her salvation? Mike, we'll start with you.
Okay, so I think I heard 4 questions in there. Is that about right? There was the beginning was something about forgiveness.
Yes,
right?
If she's having negative feelings and unable to forgive her husband, her unbelieving husband, and his daughter, her stepdaughter, if we hear the trumpet sound, is she going to go up, or is she going to miss the rapture because of her negative thoughts?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd just say, as far as the rapture is concerned, if you have placed faith in Jesus Christ for salvation, you would go in the rapture. So it's not about being perfect. No one's going to be perfect until we go to see the Lord face to face, and then we'll be glorified in his presence. So if you're a believer, you're going. As far as I think this is a fundamental thing for people to understand. There's a difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness is a one-way street. We're commanded to do it. We must forgive. But reconciliation is a two-way street, and it actually requires a response on the other person's end. So one of the things I find with questions like these is people confuse those two things. Yeah. They think that because maybe there's not reconciliation, which is predicated upon not only their forgiving of somebody, but that other person perhaps repenting of sin, earning trust back on their end through just good character and honoring their word, keeping their promises, etc. So I'd say, first of all, just don't confuse those two things. Just because you find reconciliation difficult, I think we all do. Mm-hmm. If somebody has sinned against you, they've hurt you, they've not been living up to their covenant agreement in a marriage, that's a very hard thing to do. And so you'll sense that feeling of struggle, but struggle is not sin per se. So we have to be careful giving in to sinful temptation. Okay, yeah, that's sin, but simply that you find something difficult does not make it sin. So I would just want to point out, yes, don't worry about this fact that you're probably struggling with reconciliation. Yes, you'll go in the rapture, but it is true. I think on a day-to-day basis, we have to practice forgiveness. Just like Peter said, Lord, how many times should I forgive somebody? 7 times, 70 times 7, that we are forgiving people. That is a part of our vocation as Christians.
All right. Bobby, what do you think?
Well, one of the things that I've experienced is tension around what Mike's sharing. I've always looked at it from the standpoint that we're commanded to forgive, just forgive one another. But then I started thinking more about it, and I had some teachers say, well, you can't forgive unless somebody asks for forgiveness. And I think maybe my question, just to throw back to Mike, because I would genuinely appreciate maybe your perspective, based on the way you described that, would you then say that God has forgiven everybody, they're just not reconciled to him. Because I would look at it like, okay, God forgives people once they ask for forgiveness. And so the outcome then of that, it's like the benefit of forgiveness is reconciliation. And so I can kind of go back and forth on that. And that would be the part that I would struggle with a little bit. Like, does God forgive people? They're just not reconciled. And it wouldn't seem like that's the case to me, but I wouldn't see that lack of forgiveness anything compromising in his moral character. What are your thoughts on that before we answer the other question?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I think first of all, we have to remember whenever we apply a word or action to God, it's going to be different than it is when we apply it to human beings. So in the case that I'm referring to, we're talking about between two finite sinful individuals. So using forgiveness and reconciliation with respect to them. So obviously, if we're going to change the parties we're talking about, we're going to talk about God towards man, I'd say there probably is a difference there, but I'd certainly say the cross is God's offer of forgiveness, isn't it? That's what he's offering, right? He did not send his son in the world to condemn the world, but in order that through his son he might be saved. So I guess maybe I would just want to not use the word univocally, the way that we're using it for two finite sinful people. But I would want to say, if I can just add a couple extra words for clarification, in the cross, God is offering forgiveness to people through Jesus Christ. So that means God's disposition, his character, has to already be a willingness to forgive, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. No, that's good. It is funny. This is where semantics gets really important for us. It becomes very important for us because we got to define our words and our terms. But it is one of those things, you know, we all have them, Mike. There's these certain subjects where you go back and forth on and you pull away and you go, okay, well, I'm here on this, and I'm just trying to think how all that fits together, because I also get your heart. Like, we would not want somebody to feel like, oh, well, you don't have to forgive, because that could become really toxic as well. So thanks for your clarification and engaging me in that conversation.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate your kind of tossing that back, because you're right. I think sometimes we can, and this happens a lot in theology and theological discourse, people will take a human definition of something, whether it's forgiveness, knowledge, wisdom, remembrance, love, forgiveness, and then they'll kind of survey how that word is used both in the Bible with respect to sinful, fallen human beings, or the way we use it in the world today, and then kind of lob it back onto God like it would apply in exactly the same way. And as we've talked about before, the nature of human language about God is that it can speak meaningfully of God, but it always will fall short ultimately of who God is. We cannot exhaust God with our language, so we have to be careful about when we apply words to God.
Okay. Yeah. And our second question here about once saved, always saved, is our listener's stepdaughter saved? She's wondering, because she claims she's a Christian, but she gossips, she lies, and she's into voodoo. So where do you, ultimately we can't judge, but based on these things, what would you guys say? Bobby, we'll start with you on this one.
Jesus is clear. You're going to know them by their fruits, but I think we have to be careful. Like, we do want to, not only examine ourselves, but we ask ourselves, do we see the fruit of Christianity bearing in the person who professes it? I would never want to posture myself in the position of saying who's in and who's out if that person is professing Jesus. If somebody's professing to believe in Allah, well, then that makes it easy for us. But if somebody's professing to be a Christian, I would say that we do have the right as believers to spur one another on to good deeds and to challenge people to evaluate the genuineness of their profession. One thing that I would share is I would encourage this person to not get mad or frustrated at this individual and let this inspection time create relational friction. everybody has their own journey. And we need to love people and meet people where they are. God's the judge. He's the one, he says, vengeance is mine. He's the one who ultimately knows who's in or who's out. So we can pray for the person. We can make sure that we don't strain the relationship. But we can also challenge each other to really think about our actions when we're living outside of what the Bible would have to say. Sometimes somebody could be into voodoo or some of these other things, and it's not that they're not saved. They just need some Christian discipleship.
Mike, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think, A.W. Tozer had a great line in his book, The Pursuit of God. Be careful to judge in a moment what it takes a lifetime to prove. And so I think, while I personally believe, if somebody's truly born again, yes, they're going to stay born again. But again, who ultimately knows that with 100% accuracy? Mm-hmm. Only God.
Yeah.
Only God fully knows those who are fully his. We can simply judge, as Bobby said, by the fruit that we see, the evidence that we see. And many times we can only see that in the present. We can look back in the past, like John says in 1 John, they went out from us, but they were never of us. If they were of us, they would have continued with us. And that's an interesting criteria because that's in hindsight, right? Like, because these guys were with them, probably in the circle of believers there that John is referring to. And probably people were thinking, oh, they're one of us, right? They're in our group. But then eventually they abandon. And John says, guess what? Not that they lost their salvation, but that they never had it in the first place. So I think we simply need to be people who are looking at the fruit in someone's life, and then we minister accordingly. If someone is manifesting the fruit of the Spirit, then we want to encourage a person like that. And if they're feeling condemned and wrongly just guilty over things the Lord has forgiven them for and they're no longer doing, we would want to remind them of their position in Christ. But to a person who claims to be saved, but they're boldly sinning, they're proudly living a licentiously sinful lifestyle, we have no room in Scripture to affirm them in what we're doing, but we have to warn them of the danger of the path that they're on, that they might not be saved.
That's right.
This is Pastor's Perspective. I'm Brian Perez here with Pastors Mike Chaddick and Bobby Conway, answering your questions about the Bible and the Christian faith, just about anything that's on your mind. Give us a call at 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. And we'll begin our time on the phones with Agosa in California. Wants to know how Christians can stick to their religion, their beliefs, when people around them don't believe their why isn't my mouse working? I don't know. Hold on, I think I know why. Hold on. Boom, boom, boom. Fixed it. All right, Agosa, that's pretty much your question, right?
Yeah. Hi, pastors. Yeah, that's my question.
Okay. What do you guys tell Agosa? Mike, we'll start with you.
Yeah, it's a good question, and to be honest, it's one we all need to be thinking about because in many ways, maybe not all, but in many ways it looks like the culture here in the United States is becoming increasingly unfriendly and even hostile to Christian beliefs and Christian values. So it's definitely something we all need to be thinking about. I think we can look back to the story of the people of God all throughout history, and we can certainly look at the early church. They're not in a friendly environment, right? It's a pagan culture. There's very few Christians in the world at that time. Virtually everything around them was saturated in some version of paganism. And here's the cool thing. And yet the church thrived.
Yeah.
The early church thrived. I feel like they had less advantages by far than the American Christian church does today. They didn't have the money. They didn't have the resources. They didn't have the institutions. They didn't have a political say at all, like none, to shape the laws that were being passed. None of that. And yet it was said of them that they've turned the world upside down. So I think let's be reminded that as bad as things are getting, and I certainly do see that it can be an opportunity to thrive. But then it begs the question being asked, well, how did they do that? And I think Acts 42 tells us what they did, and it was very simple, and it didn't cost a lot of money. They continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and the fellowship and the breaking of bread and prayers, that we are to continue meditating on the word of God day and night, that like the Psalms say, we'll be like a tree planted by the water whose leaves never wither. We continue in koinonia, and koinonia, fellowship, it's more than just having a cup of coffee in a certain building on a church property. Koinonia is mutual participation in a shared pursuit. That means you make it a part of your life to support the work of the gospel. You actually give your life, your time, your money to getting the gospel out and furthering it. And then we see the breaking of bread. I think that's, I think it probably includes sharing common meals, so just sharing life, community with other believers, but I also think it refers to the Lord's Supper, so continuing to observe that, and a life of prayer, that we continue to pray and seek the Lord and to be connected with God and what God is doing in the world, so that we don't get just absolutely sucked into all the madness and the chaos and the news cycle and everything else. So I would just say it's very simple. Look at what the early church did. That was their environment, and Acts 2:42 is a great guide for believers in tough times.
Now, Agosa, with your question, were you just generalizing, or are you noticing this with family or friends or people at work or school?
Well, let me tell you this, pastors. With this question, I'm just with this question, I'm just saying this. Let me think. Oh yeah. I'm just saying that. Like, what if I'm just saying this because I know there's some people that will believe my vision. Mm-hmm. So I want to figure out how to navigate that.
Okay, Bobby, any advice for Agosa?
How to navigate his vision.
Yeah, how to get maybe people on the same path as you, or the same, to be able to see what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Well, I think what Mike said is very helpful. I do think that there is a lot of toxicity in the church. We need a reformation today. There's no doubt that we need another reformation. We're going to have to get our greatest thinkers and leaders together, and we're going to have to kind of have sort of a manifesto of sorts on what we believe and affirm biblical Christianity, because I can understand the swelling of doubt that's taking place in our culture, especially for those who are Gen Xers and baby boomers who are alive, because we have witnessed the cultural change as well as the church change on many fronts. So there was a time when the culture shared the values of the church to a large degree. With the emergence of the internet, the world is next door, and the world has moved next door. And so we have a very secular, pluralistic, postmodern, deconstructive kind of a culture that we're living in. And we're seeing all these different types of ideologies with critical race theory, and it's creating tons of opposition against the church. And then inside the church, many are trying to placate culture and make our message more palatable by getting enmeshed with culture and adopting LGBTQ, adopting critical race theory, adopting the rank immorality of our time, adopting secularism in many ways, and adopting pluralism. And so what's happened is this has created a massive ball of confusion. And many pastors, sadly, are living off a pop culture diet. They're not equipped with the depth to properly lead their flocks to understand the questions that we're up against. And we need to have pastors who are trained to equip their congregations with a biblical worldview. We've got to, we need the gift of leadership in the church, but we don't need the CEO of the church. We need theologians. We need people who can think Christianly. And so if we have this manifesto of sorts, then we can come together and we can gather. So here's the good news. We're hearing statistics about, 20% of the people left the church in COVID. Well, 20% of those people that left, it's not like the church of Jesus Christ is shrinking because we're not losing our salvation. The church is being purged. It's being purified. But we've got problems inside and outside. I think we need a reformation that's going to be preceded by leaders rising up, creating a manifesto, and we come together and we got to figure out how to train our flocks. And here's the deal. Many people came to church in the last 20, 30 years, and they loved church because they were entertained. Neil Postman wrote a book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. And now we've got a whole population of people inside the church. They want to be entertained. They want a pop culture message. They don't want to have to think. And what happens is we can't engage this culture with the 4 spiritual laws anymore. The problems are much too complex. So this means evangelism is going to require a lot of apologetic and worldview training, and it means it's going to have to start with pastors. And then yes, God, if he would be so gracious to give us a revival, that would be beautiful. But the danger of a revival absent of deep discipleship is the revival will come and then people will go, oh, all we need is the Spirit. All we need is the Spirit. And guess what? They won't have the theological training to deal with the questions that their people are asking them when they're out doing evangelism. So it's both spirit and truth. Lord, help us.
That book, again, is called Amusing Ourselves to Death, Public Discourse in the Age of Show Business. And we do see that in the church a lot. The author is Neil Postman. It's available on Amazon. You order it, and you'll get your postman to deliver it to you. Or you can order it on Kindle or whatever and read it immediately. But Agosa, thank you so much for your question today on Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173 is our number. And next we're going to go to Lisa in California. Hi there, Lisa. How can we help you?
Hi, God bless you guys. Thank you for taking my call. I'm just wondering if somebody is demonically possessed. This sounds weird, but do demons like hot bodies of non-believers, or do they want to stay inside of a body and they can lay like dormant until another situation happens where like they might attack the Christian and the family's life and go after them again?
Bobby, what do you say about this?
Yeah.
I'm cracking up at the phrase, do demons hot bodies? That's a good use of language right there. This question is probably rooted in the Gospel of Luke, in chapter 11, in verse 24 and following. Jesus says, when the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places seeking rest. And finding none, it says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when it comes, it finds the house swept and put in order. Then it goes and brings 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last state of that person is worse than the first. And so you get this imagery of demons looking to inhabit non-believers, which would be possession. How all that works out, I'm not entirely sure. I find it really intriguing. I mean, you even think about Jesus in the particular passage where he frees the person who was demon possessed, and then he puts these demons into the swine, and then they go down the cliff, and it's as if they needed something to inhabit. And so what does he do? Well, he makes the person who was unclean with demons clean, and then he puts the demons where they belong with what they recognized as unclean, the swine. So I would say that demons do have a purpose, and it's to stop the gospel from progressing forward. They don't just want to roam around missionless. They're on mission, and their mission is against humanity and ultimately against God himself. And they pull that mission off by oppressing Christians and by possessing non-Christians. And it seems as if people leave themselves too exposed, they can experience a multiplication of demonic possession, as you see in the picture of the demoniac, whereby Jesus cast out many demons, more than 7. I mean, this was horrific. And so I think that that's how I would explain the demon hopping that you're asking about.
Mike, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that seems to be right. I don't think the scriptures explain everything we would want to know about it, but yeah, it seems that demons do desire to inhabit a body of some kind, again, like he pointed out in Mark chapter 5 with the demoniac, that the demons recognize Jesus, they're fearful, they'll be thrown into the abyss, and they actually ask Jesus, permit us to go into the herd of swine. But then the weird thing is they just run them right off the cliff and kill them. So it's kind of like if they wanted to inhabit a body and they needed it, why'd they kill them immediately after? But I think it's just this idea of that's what the demonic does. It seeks to bring death in many different ways. It seeks to bring ruin and chaos, and that's what it does. Demonic activity is not life-giving. So, just people who get curious about this kind of thing and, they're interested, just remember, even if people are attracted to the demonic because they think they're gaining something, they're really not. You're never gaining anything. When you dabble with the demonic, what you get is death paid out in various forms. That's what you see. Wherever the demonic is, there is a destruction and diminishing of the image of God, of human life, of creation. And so it's not something that, anybody should be dabbling in.
Yeah. Bobby, you had some thoughts, I think?
Well, I thought that was a good point, what Mike brought out, because we do tend to hear that they want to embody something. And I don't know what all of the capacities of the demonic world are, but Mike brings up a really good point, because it's like, okay, well, if you're just going to go and embody the swine, well, they die. As long as they've got, a little bit of breath, I mean, they're going to drown and they're going to die. And so then they're going to go roaming again. And I guess, how long do they roam? What does that look like? Are they content to not be embodied? This is a little bit of the unseen realm that I'm content just to leave there.
Thank you so much for your question, Lisa, today on the Pastor's Perspective program. And we're just about out of time for the first half of the program, but we've got a full other half, or another full half to get to. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be to the rest of your phone calls. The number to call again is 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. Answering your questions today, our author and apologist, Dr. Bobby Conway from the 1 Minute Apologist channel on YouTube, and the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. Here in studio is Mike Chaddick, the pastor of Image Church in Orange County, California. And we'd love to talk to you, so give us a call. 888-564-6173 is the phone number, 888-564-6173. And you can also watch us right now, if you'd like to, on Facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective, as well as on the YouTube channel of our flagship radio station in Southern California, KWAVE.com.
Pastor's Perspective continues in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Pastor's Perspective continues with your question to 1-888-564-6173. And now here again is your host, Brian Perez.
And in the studio answering your questions today, Mike Chaddock, the senior pastor of Image Church in Orange County, California. And on the Bobby Cam, it's Bobby Conway, the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's also the 1minuteapologist.com dude with over 1,200 videos that you can watch on his YouTube channel, 1 Minute Apologist. And we'll start this time on the phones with Ernie calling us from California. Hi there, Ernie. How can we help you?
Hi, pastors. Thank you for taking my call. I've been experiencing just some lack of motivation, some self-doubt, and I kind of feel like a little bit of depression. And I'm expecting my fourth child, and just not really sure why I feel this way. It kind of all just came to a head, and it's been about 2 months now. And I'm just looking for some help and some guidance on how to, change my way of thinking, I guess.
All right. Bobby, what would you say? And I know we can't do a full-on counseling session here, but are there any particular thoughts that come to mind?
There are a number of things that we can do when we're faced with anxiety. We want to ask ourselves, what is the cause of the anxiety? Sometimes we can point to a particular instance, like maybe being overwhelmed with another child, maybe not being satisfied in our marriage, maybe being worried about job security. So we need to try to isolate stuff. I had a blank sheet of paper. I would try to answer the question, what is the cause of my anxiety? And I would start writing those issues down. I would say that if you're not even really sure, that could be an indication of an anxiety disorder that is emerging. And sometimes what can happen is as we get older, our brains don't produce the amount of dopamine and serotonin that they once did. Those are kind of the happy chemicals in the brain. And when you lose those, you can kind of become, like they say, chemically imbalanced. You don't have the proper balance of dopamine and serotonin. And so that can create a depression. It can start making you anxious. You can start thinking, what's wrong with me? And it can start getting hopeless. So I would say, number one, I commend you for calling. I would say, don't panic. If there's any kind of a double life that's being lived, address that. Try to figure out what's going on. What's the source of this? If you think that it might be medically related, like something, as I'm mentioning, with a chemical imbalance or something, go see a doctor, because maybe an antidepressant could be helpful to provide the dopamine and serotonin that you need. If you say, oh, I don't think it's that at all, I just think it's circumstantial, then how do you as a Christian ride out those circumstances? And so I would say learning to be present is really huge. The problem with anxiety, it's a future emotion, and whenever we're living in it, we're not in the present. And Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow. And so the way to deal with anxiety is to learn how to live in the moment, to learn how to, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So things you can do is you could pray, you can seek counsel, you could go talk to a doctor, you could check out your diet. You could decrease the amount of sugar that you're taking in. You can make sure that you're not so busy that you're wearing yourself out. You could ask, why am I scared to trust God in particular areas of my life? So there's lots of things like that I would say, and I know Mike would be able to offer some helpful points as well.
Yeah, Ernie, I feel for you. I have a blended family of 6 children and 4 at home. So when I keyed in on, you said, your 4th child is coming, and I think that's an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Sometimes, I think caring for children in this world, providing for them, that's a very difficult thing. And I wouldn't think that anxiety and fear is actually all that unusual for someone who carries that kind of responsibility. So I would just want to say, I think part of the anxiety fear phenomenon is it creates a sense of isolation where you feel like something's wrong with you in contrast to everyone else.
Right,
so a lot of people, when you talk to them, when they say, well, I have all this anxiety and fear, they think they're the only ones doing it. But what you find out when you start talking to people is there's an incredible number of people dealing with serious fear and anxiety. So I would just want to say you're not alone. I think many of us are dealing with it. I mean, I think a lot of us just had an entire year of anxiety and fear every day because basic things you should be able to take for granted, you simply couldn't do. And that's just a natural reaction to the unknown and the unpredictable and the unstable. But like Bobby said wisely, I think there are a number of possible causes, and it can even be more than one thing happening. I think as pastors and Christians, we can tend to assume that everything is a spiritual cause. But there's people I know that are trusting in God's promises. They are meditating on the word day and night. They are praying without ceasing. They're gathering with the saints, and yet they have it anyway.
Right.
And like Bobby said, you find out, well, hey, how old are you? Oh, well, I'm a male in my mid-40s, and well, do you have brain fog? Do you have low motivation and drive? Do you have this? Like, oh, well, it's this. Testosterone starts dropping off, and all these other things. So, I don't diet. I eat junk food. I'm poisoning myself every day. Oh, and then I don't exercise. And now I'm not releasing any, chemicals, endorphins that actually make me feel good instead of lousy. So there can be a whole host of reasons that are possible. And like Bobby said, I think that's really wise to kind of jot down, hey, what are some possible causes? And it might be more than one. And then just from a pastoral perspective, I would just ask the question, are there any promises of God that I am refusing to believe? Because obviously, if there's promises of God and I'm acting in unbelief towards those promises of God, then I can know there's at least a partial spiritual cause if it's not the whole thing. So and again, just my prayers go out to you, brother. I just pray the Lord will bless you and keep you, cause his face to shine upon you and give you peace.
Yeah. Bobby, thoughts?
Yeah, I thought maybe just to kind of help Ernie out, I do think what Mike was saying, you're not alone. And what Mike said about, COVID and all that, it was such a tough year. And just to be vulnerable with you, Ernie, and with the audience, I shared probably a year and a half ago how I came off of antidepressants. And, I was doing really good. Well, when I came out here to plant a church, the first 3 months were just brutal. And I learned firsthand what a negative mindset could do for sinking me into absolute depression. And I think probably the audience was hearing me say at times, like, man, it's tough out here. I mean, we were all getting COVID. Our dog almost died. There were just all kinds of things that were happening. And it is very normal when you follow God in a big vision, that vision gets tested hard. And I was starting to get hopeless. I found myself literally 3 months ago thinking, my God, did Satan deceive me into coming out here to plant a church? I was asking myself that. And I thought I made a wrong decision. I was grieving because I left California. I never wanted to move away from California. I loved California. I was wanting to stay in California, and the doors just weren't opening. And so we felt these great doors open. We went through them. I was excited about the opportunity, but when I settled, I got panicky. I got anxious. It was winter. It was cold. I started sleeping a ton. And my wife and kids were putting boundaries up, saying, you become so negative, we can't even listen to you anymore. You can't, you're bringing us down. And so I started bringing my wife down. She started getting depressed about the church plant. My kids, I'm actually a pretty positive, more of a motivating individual, but I lost that. And I literally was feeling hopeless, and I went and I got on an antidepressant again. But before I got on an antidepressant, I remember talking to Pastor Brian Brodersen, and he said, Bobby, he says, Satan doesn't plant churches. You know, when he said, if you're thinking Satan sent you out there to plant a church, he doesn't plant churches. But that was the level of deception. It was so bad that I thought Satan tricked me to plant a church for Jesus, right? And I was like, that was how twisted my thinking got, folks. So all I want to say is, man, I sit on this program and I try to offer perspective and hope. And, you know, there's hard days for me too. And I just thank you because we get encouraging emails from you that lift our spirits, that let us know that you're praying for us. And I would welcome prayers for Ernie. I would welcome prayers for my family. But I would say, Brian, he so encouraged me. God just spoke through him in that moment. And I decided that I am going to catch negative thinking and I'm going to determine to focus, as Mike said, on the positive things. And I cannot explain how much the positivity began to change my life. And before you know it, the glass was half full. And now the last 3 months, I would say have been the most fulfilling 3 months of my entire 25 years of Christian ministry.
Wow.
And I went from being in despair to delight with a mindset. And, you know, an antidepressant, I look at it like, you know, high blood pressure medicine or like wearing glasses. You know, maybe I'll try and get off it someday again. If not, that's okay. If I get into low-grade depressions, I'd rather just, it's like a life vest when you're drowning. You still got to swim to shore, but it just helps you to feel like it's doable.
Yeah.
I hope that helps, Ernie.
Yeah. And just to clarify, your dog was not dying of COVID, right? You kind of mentioned that in the same sentence, but we just wanted to clarify that wasn't
that's
the case.
right.
All right. So, Ernie, thanks for your phone call today, and we hope that those words from Bobby and Mike did encourage you. Next, we're going to go to Rudy. Thank you for calling 888-564-6173. How can we help you?
Yeah, I got a question. If God is all loving and knowing, why would he invent a place of eternal torment and suffering? And I know the answer is for the demons and his followers, but why would he invent a place like that for human beings? That's the question.
Did he invent it for human beings, Mike?
Well, it was created for the devil and his angels. At least that's what the scriptures say. So, yeah, I mean, if did you want to? Is that your whole question, Rudy, or did you get cut off?
No, that's the whole question. My son was really asking, why would God invent a place of eternal torment and suffering for human beings? Why would he put human beings in there? Why wouldn't he just make them sick?
Well, again, as far as the suffering, let's keep in mind that's human beings created that. God didn't create suffering, we did. God created a beautiful world that was in Hebrew, tov, 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 good, 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 good. It was good.
That's right.
I mean, try to find some suffering in Genesis 1-2, you know, and let me know where you find it, because it's not there. It's literally paradise. That's what Eden means, by the way. Garden, it's paradise. That's what it is. And where did suffering come from? That is what we have done with what God has given us. So ultimately, the real dilemma, if there's a dilemma, it's not why did God like randomly decide to create? Well, he didn't. He made everything good. We did that. But the question is, why did God make people who could go bad? That to me is a little bit more of a fundamental question. And I think the idea is that if God is actually going to extend his love to a creature that is able to truly respond in love also, that creature must be free to make that decision. And so ultimately, the only way God could create human beings that would never experience suffering is if he altered them in such a way that they are more like robots. They are not able to do what they want to do. They simply do what they're pre-programmed to do. So that, in a sense, for me anyway, and I'm sure Bobby has probably a more detailed answer, but that's ultimately the reason God created a world good. By the way, he's going to make it good again. Let's remember the end of Revelation isn't all just fire and chaos and brimstone. It is new heavens and new earth, and the tree of life that was there in the garden at the beginning is going to be there again, and it's actually going to be better than it ever was, because it's actually the garden that encompasses all of the world, all of the earth, with the way God originally intended, but it's never been. So God's going to get us there. And what's crazy to me is that people don't want to go there. They would rather go to hell than go to heaven. That's the crazy part. What's crazy is that people wanted a murderer, Barabbas. They said, give us Barabbas rather than the author of life. That's crazy. And again, that's just the sin and depravity that's possible in the human heart.
So if God created hell only for the demons and his angels, I think what Rudy's son is asking is why throw humans in there? If God loves humans so much, couldn't he think of another alternative, something that's not with suffering and things of that nature? Bobby, what would you say?
I mean, hell is a hard topic. I mean, no doubt about it. I wrestle with it from my human perspective. At the same token, my job is to submit my angst with Scripture to Scripture and to God. And he is good. He is Tov. And I would say that, hell is basically to be in a place outside of the presence of God. I guess the question would be, where else would you go? I mean, call it whatever you want to call it. If you're not in heaven, you're in hell. And so if you're not with God, you're not with him. And so you're without him. And I would say that's the language we use for being separated from God. I think the harder thing as well for us to remember is, the only way around this is for God to have created robotic like demons and robotic like humans, where we don't have free will. And of course, if we were just puppets, but what kind of a world would that be for God? I mean, it's kind of like, that illustration wouldn't be appropriate, so I'll pass on that. But I would say, I thought about all the kids. I kind of want to know
what that was now, Bobby.
You can tell us off the air, Bobby.
Yeah. The moms are going to be thanking me for this right now. I'm looking out for your kids here. I almost had an impulsive moment. The ADD brain does a lot of weird things on the air sometimes. But here is the deal. What you see is what you get with God creating a world with free will. Yet, just because our freedom would choose to do otherwise, that is, that we wouldn't do what God desires for us to do, should he not create a world for us who do believe in him to be with him, just because there are those who won't believe in him? And so, unfortunately, that's the world that we do live in. It's tough, it's difficult, and the good news is people can believe if they don't want to go there, and we have the promise of a world without suffering. But in this world for now, it's there, and it shows itself every day in its ugliness. And so, Lord, help us and come quickly.
Amen. Rudy, thank you so much for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. And there's a song that's going to get stuck in your head now because of the next call that we're going to do. And, so be it. Sharona, welcome to the Pastor's Perspective program.
My Sharona.
Yes.
Yes.
You've heard that all your life, haven't you?
Yes, I was named after that song. That
you
shows
were?
my age.
Really?
Yeah. Yes.
Love it.
It shows my parents' age, I should say. It shows my parents' age.
Right. So how can we help you?
So I guess I have a prayer request based on kind of my question. And with the world that we live in being full of so much division, and, the Lord created us to be one bride. What is your thoughts on how denominations and these differences that are out here in churches is keeping us separated? Like it's keeping us divided on these little, I'm going to use the word technicalities. I think sometimes the things that don't make the difference of heaven and hell, and just the impact that has on the division that we see in the world right now. And then just maybe a challenge and a call to action for churches to kind of step up and let's do something different to take down those walls of division so we can actually start operating in unity as one bride, the way Christ designed it. And I'm going to hang up and listen to your answer.
Well, hang on. Don't
prayer request.
Yeah, don't hang up just yet, because we want to I mean, Mike and Bobby both, they're both pastors of a church called Image Church, but that's besides the point. I think both of these guys, you called it on a good day because both of these guys would like to see that at their church, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's, I thought what you said was spot on, and I think I agree. The one thing I want to point out when we start talking about denominations and divisions, all that, I just want to point out difference is not the same as division. I think division is more a matter of a heart. It's an attitude and what you do with your differences. So I don't, like some people are saying, if we're going to overcome division, you literally all have to meet under the same building. So if you go to a city, you got to have one really big mega church, right, with a roof big enough for everybody. And if you don't do that, that's not unity. Or, if you don't agree on every secondary matter, that's division also. So I'd say I definitely agree that there has been differences that were used as occasion for division in the history of the church. And I think certainly in Protestantism, early Protestantism in Europe, you saw so much division. Even in America, if you look at early history of America, Puritans wouldn't rent to Quakers. They wouldn't rent them an apartment. Quakers wouldn't rent to Puritans or Anglicans and all this stuff. So, I mean, and that's division, right? Because you're not just saying, hey, I read, 1 Corinthians 1 differently than you. You're actually saying, I'm going to treat you in a way that is unloving and unkind and is not appropriate to somebody I'm claiming is a member of the same body of Christ, right? So I think that's the main thing. How are we treating people? I would just say that's kind of the main thing, but I do see it as a major issue. It mattered to Jesus in his high priestly prayer the night before he dies. I always thought this was interesting. How important is unity? Well, when Jesus is going to die in the Gospel of John, he's praying, and in his high priestly prayer, he says, Father, I pray that they, that's his disciples, may be one, even as you and I are one. I and you and me, that they may be one as you. And it's like, wow. That's really unified, right? As one as the Son is with the Father, and then it's on Jesus' mind when you're dying. Because I think, death has the effect of really clarifying what's most important,
right?
And here Jesus is. You could think about a lot of things. You could focus on the pain, but instead he's focusing on the unity of his followers, of his disciples. So unity is not a side thing. And I do think there are a lot of Christians, and I've talked to some, that think unity is not important. They think, well, no, truth matters more. Well, no, you can't make truth and love and unity in opposition, because the Bible doesn't do that. Jesus didn't say, hey, pick which one you like, truth, love, or unity, and then whichever one you happen. No, the goal for the church is to do all of those things.
Yeah.
It's tell the truth, love, and be unified.
Yep.
And you have to do all of them. And I admit that's going to be hard work, and it's a work in progress, but it's something I truly believe we should all be aiming at.
Yeah. Bobby, how are you trying to accomplish that?
Well, for example, this weekend we're starting a series called Race in the Gospel. And we're just inviting the community, and we're just going to be discussing how the gospel unifies us. And, we want, my passion is to have a diverse church. I want us to really worship together as different ethnicities, and in particular in the South, the black and white. It's a burden of mine, and I think that the gospel's the thing that ultimately reconciles us. I think that if we're going to unify as churches, we really do need to recognize what are some of our denominational distinctives are, because a lot of these distinctives that come into bear, these weren't first century issues. And so we need to kind of go back to the first century. I mean, we need to look at the book of Acts and think, when the church began, what did they need to agree on to be one together? And I would understand that, yes, you might not be able to be a Southern Baptist or a Presbyterian. That's okay. But for us to be able to celebrate our belief in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, and our faith and trust in him, and getting back to that core message, I think that is crucial. But I also think because of where we are, a lot of the apologetics issues that emerged, they were emerging. I see a caller calling about Nestorianism. This was a heresy, and the apologists had to address this because Nestorians believed that Christ was two persons. And yet all these different heresies that were coming up. And today, what you have to do in apologetics, you have to meet and address the issues of our time. Today, we got the LGBTQ. We've got critical race theory in an extreme viewpoint on that. That looks rooted in Marxism. We have to know what these things are, pluralism, and address it. So we can't just say, let's believe in the gospel. We have to know how we need to unify on what are the core issues. And that gets tricky because we hold on to our pet peeves.
Yep. Mike, did you have a...
Yeah, and just remember, people are saved not by what divides us, but by what unites us, and that is the gospel of Jesus Christ, his life, his death, his resurrection, forgiveness of sins in his name, and by believing in him, that is how we are saved. Denominations only come up after that fact.
Amen. All right, guys,
Lord
talk to you tomorrow.
us.
Good night.
Listening to Pastor's Perspective. We trust you've been blessed and had your question answered. Join us Monday through Friday and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Pastor's Perspective. The preceding was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, California.